Kabal. Quite possibly the most underused Mortal Kombat character. Yes, you can make the case that many other MK characters are underused, and they are, but relative to what they offer, it kinda makes sense why they're underused. Chameleon's a second fiddle's a Terran who has no backstory, no special moves of his own, and never speaks. Hotaru's a fuck-all character from a fuck-all realm with a fuck-all backstory and fuck-all goals. Reiko's just a dude who looks like he watched The Crow too many times. Kung Jin is Kung Lao with a bow, and Kabal is an ex-Black Dragon and potentially ex-cop with hook swords, speed powers, gas mask, hidden messed up face, lung cancer, 10th degree burns all over his body, or just unusually potent acne, who was betrayed, is out for vengeance, was bad, but kinda redeems himself, but kinda not. He's morally interesting, he's visually interesting. What the fuck happened here, NRS? Bad, NRS. Well, this goes for you too, because long before In Her Ass got his mitts on the character, Midway, the original company, prepped this beautiful arc for Kabal. A scorned ex-Black Dragon put through a harrowing trial by fire, probably literally, who questions his loyalties and role in life and evolves into more of a good guy and helps the heroes and arrives at a special place as this multi-layered character. And they looked at the work they had done and saw that it was good, but then they looked some more, brain cells visibly fading, and went, yeah, let's make him join the Black Dragon again. Psych.
Where did that bring you? Back to me.
Wait a minute, are you sure?
Yeah.
Positive. You don't want to think about it.
No,
but
the demons told me to.
I mean, I appreciate the change of direction, but I hate it.
The thing about bringing a character back full circle to their starting point is it can be an interesting, fulfilling, and poignant decision if there's a good reason behind it. Midway didn't have a good reason behind it. Interestingly, the original Kabal was a Black Dragon member who then gets mutilated and defects and joins the good guys, whereas his MK9 counterpart was a Black Dragon member who turns cop, then gets mutilated and stays good. It's hard to ignore the fact that the original version makes way more sense. You can clearly see that his physical maiming was meant to accompany his moral turning point as a character, and thus having him abandon the Black Dragon and become a cop before becoming a charred husk face that looks like he just narrowly survived re-entry into the atmosphere makes both his change in morality and skin quality fairly arbitrary. On the other hand, picking on a good guy does a lot to inform his resentment of the world and his cruel fate, helping tremendously with that temptation to turn evil again that Kabal is partly known for. Making him a cop before his chicken flambe surprise gives him the opportunity to interact with Stryker more, potentially others too, giving you more opportunities to flesh out his character. Perhaps the solution is to switch around the first bits and have Kabal start out as a cop, who then gets dragged into the underworld and becomes a Black Dragon member. Be it because he's disillusioned by the Force, he's enticed by the dark side, or he's blackmailed, and then gets turbo kebabbed. Come to think of it, the original version of Kabal very much plays out like a reverse Darth Vader. Vader started out as a benevolent Jedi who got and turned evil, while Kabal was a bad guy who got Burger Kinged and turned good. And the life support, the asthmatic breathing, and the hefty similarities between the masks make me think that this was intentional. For some reason, I always associated Kabal with mystery criminals like John Doe from Seven or the Saw guy. Way back when I was a puny Warlock, there was this film called Night Moves in which Raiden himself, Christopher Lambert, played a chess grandmaster who's continually taunted and contacted by a serial killer who uses a voice modulator, and I believe there were some funky breath sounds in there too, like from some weird gas mask. And that was right around when I started playing Mortal Kombat Trilogy and fiddling around with its resident asthmatic Thomas the Tank Engine meets Mad Max motherfucker, and so I ended up inexorably associating one with the other. The creepiness, the mystery behind the mask, the menacing, torture-centric weapons and abilities, but also the tortured nature of the character himself, the inclination towards dark, vindictive things, the mind games, the ominous prank calls, the voice modulation, and the ha-ha-ha smug laughter, but that also betrays the unhinged need for validation and revenge that all murderous psychopaths have. All of that got jumbled into one overall character vibe. Vibe, not actual character, just flavor. For Kabal isn't a murderous psychopath, ruthless tendencies and temporary allegiance with the Black Dragon notwithstanding. Now, Kabal's original MK3 bio portrays him as a very enigmatic character whose identity is a mystery to all before revealing his past Black Dragon association. I suppose you could play around with his identity if you really wanted to and aren't happy with his NYPD origin. Kabal could have been the previous leader of the Black Dragon before he got double-crossed by Kano. He could be an outworlder, a scorned general of Shao Kahn's, one of Scorpion's victims on the latter's path for vengeance. You could retcon Chaos Realm into it. Kabal could have been trapped in that twisted dimension, and that's what led to him looking like he fell asleep on the tanning bed. I mean, there's a reason why Chaos Realmers look so messed up, like they've been to Epstein's Island too many times. For me though, him being a cop makes sense, considering the duality and moral complexity inherent to him, so it makes sense why they went in that direction with him in MK9, and shows that they had a decent understanding of the character. By the way, you know what's funny? Kabal is never once given a real name. His name in all the bios and all the wikis and all the incarnations is listed as Kabal, which I don't mind, don't get me wrong. A full name added for the sake of it is superfluous really, but even in MK9, when he was a cop, Stryker just calls him Kabal and nothing else. That's kind of funny to me. I mean, sure, it could be his call sign or something, but his name was also Kabal back when he was a Black Dragon before joining the Force, so why would you use your criminal nickname as your police nickname? Why am I thinking about this? Maybe his real name is some ridiculously overlong exercise in tongue twisting that only he can pronounce fast enough, and that sounds something like and that makes everyone go, yeah, we'll stick with Kabal. It's also interesting that in his original lore, it's never really explained what happened to him. People just assume that he went skydiving too close to a volcano, and actually, even that is more of an MK9 thing. I only recently realized this, but MK3 Kabal doesn't really have burn marks or any signs of injury on his body. It's just his face that's messed up, which is somehow even more messed up. Makes the conundrum of his past that much more perplexing and intriguing. His MK3 ending mentions him defeating Motaro, so perhaps he's the one who crippled him and whom Kabal swore vengeance against. Another option, if you want to go with a mixed approach, that still sees Kabal's body scarred and burned, but not necessarily have it be as straightforward as a flamethrower to the face, then his assailant could be none other than Reptile. Would be equal parts funny and badass if Shao Kahn's extermination squads turned out to be just one dude. Just being a very facetious term, since Kabal and Kitana would be the only two people to have survived Barf Boy up to that point. Acid still burns and can leave you looking fucked up in ways that make the source of the damage harder to pinpoint. But I'm also a fan of there being multiple people involved in his betrayal, because then we can have an entire protracted quest whereby Kabal does some detective work, uncovers clues, interrogates goons, to figure out who these perpetrators are and then hunts them down one by one while trying to cover his tracks as best he can so as to not anger the special forces that he is now a part of. This way I can have my creepy cryptic serial killer phone calls where he toys with his victims and gives them puzzles to solve, and it also creates this nice little game of bullshit with characters like Sonya, Jax, and Stryker, where some of Kabal's targets were under protective custody, useful to the SF's investigations, and they suspect it's Kabal but they have no proof and they don't know for sure, and Kabal just lies through his teeth and poker faces and smiles. Presumably, you can't really tell because of the mask, and it makes the whole situation complicated and deliciously gray morally. By the way, if you're curious about what inspired Kabal's creation as a character, apparently it was the Tusken Raiders from Star Wars. So yeah, that's that answer. There's some nice contrast between Kabal's powers and his choice of weaponry. While there are exceptions, air tends to be associated with the good guys, Kung Lao, Kitana, Fujin, and as such is very well suited to mobility, dodging, counterattacks, and swift game-ending strikes meant to kill, and that can be damn near considered merciful when compared to the vast majority of agonizing torture most of the other characters can inflict upon your feeble soul. I consider Kabal's Nomad Dash to be an air skill for reasons best explained here, partly because it adds a lot of consistency to the world and the way powers work, and partly because fuck outworld magic, what the shit kind of explanation is that? His weapons, on the other hand, greatly contrast his elemental powers, as hook swords are very well suited to cleaving, gouging, rupturing, hooking, rending, wrenching, splitting open, eviscerating, and otherwise causing as much pain as possible, a fitting contrast for a most complicated multi-layered character. His speed and swiftness embody his more benevolent, cop-worthy side that desires and respects freedom and is good at outrunning his problems, his past, his darker impulses, while the hook swords represent his darkness, his resentment, and his past Black Dragon affiliation. His powers, which can be seen as his natural proclivities or his destiny, are forthright and noble, while the hook swords and saw blades he chose for himself are an expression of his disillusionment, cynicism, and his resentment over the cruel hand fate dealt him. On that topic, Kabal also has a few smoke-based moves in MK11, and I kinda want them to lean more into such abilities in the future, since smoke is halfway between air and fire and thus aptly showcases Kabal's murky morality. Also, it would add more smoke users to the rosters other than smoke. When it comes to his speed, a lot of people compare Kabal with the Flash and put his speed on similar levels, which is stupid, because that would make Kabal broken and a walking plot hole. It makes Flash and Quicksilver walking plot holes too, of course, which is something I'd like to avoid for MK. You cannot fathom how busted a speedster would be in real life, particularly one whose powers have no real drawbacks. Being able to move faster than the eye can see means you are on another plane of existence. Nothing can hit you, no one will ever ambush you unless you fall asleep on the loo or something. Fights and conflicts are snuffed out literally before they have a chance to begin, and the force, the ridiculous amount of power, friction, and heat those speeds would generate could tear the world apart. Superman's speed is said to be comparable to the Flash's, presumably a limp attempt to downplay Barry's broken powers and his supremacy as a speedster, but that creates another plot hole, because if Superman is comparably fast, then his fights would look radically different than the slow punch fest they're almost always portrayed as, but I digress. If Kabal was anywhere near the Flash or Quicksilver's level, he'd be Emperor of the fucking Omniverse by now, which is why I strongly advocate for stringent limitations to his powers. After all, there's a reason why he only has one high-speed move. If his powers were untrammeled, his entire moves list would be an FTL bonanza. His damn pokes would be him running around the world and appearing behind his afterimage to flick his opponent in the knee. Or knee him in the knee. It is an NRS game after all. So I have two main limitations in mind for Kabal Sack, which he kind of looks like, a physical limitation and a mental one. The physical one is a raw power limitation. While he possesses a very powerful elemental ability, his mastery of air is far from comprehensive, and he's only really learned to concentrate wind currents around himself and propel himself forward at great speeds. He can't create whirlwinds, he can't lift opponents, he's not much of an airbender. All he can do is dash blindly, which gives him a bit of a tunnel vision problem. Much like Sasuke's Chidori attack, he gets proverbial horse blinders, is locked in one direction, and can't do much to alter his movements during the dash, which is aptly shown by what the dash move actually does, flying past the opponent so fast it causes them to spin and get dazed. Kabal's one heck of a dance partner. If his control and mastery were better, he could presumably do anything he wanted while in that speedy state, including picking your organs apart, playing jump rope with your small intestine, and shove you into yourself and play you like an accordion. And he can't really aim at you either, because at that speed the collision would be as fatal for him as it would be for you. So all of this severely limits his otherwise frightfully impressive potential and forces him to be extra careful and conservative when using these powers, which leads me to his second mental limitation, the fact that he can move faster than he can think. When fighting, when playing an instrument, when playing a game that requires fast thinking and coordination, there are two levels. The level at which you consciously think and execute your next move, and a higher, faster level, which is purely based on instinct, whereby you shut your mind off and enter a kind of flow state and just react intuitively, literally acting faster than you can think. Kabal can tap into that higher level, but it's extremely risky. One wrong move, 1 millisecond of hesitation or second guessing, and you're dead. Our brains, evolved as they are, can't process information nearly as fast as a computer can, not consciously anyway. So it's a processing power issue, and this can become a plot point for Kabal, establishing this power and limitation as well as his refusal to tap into its highest level unless absolutely necessary, and then forcing him to do so in a dire climactic situation, possibly leading to his death, to a heroic situation, or a shocking betrayal of a situation, or all three. As for his fireball, I first got excited because I remembered it being called Gas Blast at some point, which would make for a cool argument for a smoke skill, but then when I researched the thing, it turns out it had every name under the sun, including Fireball, Eye Spark, Eye Laser, Gas Blast, and Plasma Blast. Force is probably the best bet, since it looks and behaves so much like Shao Kahn's Force Ball, but also resemble Ermac's Force Ball, which could be argued to be a Soul Ball. However, that one really only became a Soul Ball in subsequent games, and MK3 is pretty much just a Fireball or Force Ball. Kabal's projectile pretty much looks, behaves, and has the properties of a standard Force Ball, so we'll go with that. The only other noteworthy thing about his powers would be that his saw blades could be physical or illusion. Could be either some kind of Outworld or Earthrealm device or tech, like a trap, but it could also be an illusion skill since it just kind of appears out of nowhere in most situations, and he also has this interesting stance like he's summoning it from the ether. Looks a bit like a magician's trick. Then again, I believe one version just had him throwing the thing directly at the opponent, so that's definitely physical. I kinda like it being illusion more though. This makes Kabal a pretty prolific elemental user, having force, air, smoke, and potentially illusion under his repertoire, and it just reinforces how much of a badass this character is. While it might not be apparent, the message behind this character is an important one. Or at least it can be if we respect all the guidelines discussed here. Namely, the importance of facing hardship with grace instead of resentment. Enough sorrow can embitter the most wholesome of people, understandably so. Yet there are virtually zero circumstances in which succumbing to that resentment and turning against the world is in any way productive or helpful. Losing your cool and yelling in a heated conversation always makes you seem like the unhinged bad guy. Taking revenge against a childhood bully who may now be trying to be a better person could set them back. And humiliating an ex who wronged you invariably makes you feel like a shittier person for it. This is something philosophy buffs like Daddy Peterson talk about all the time, rightly so. Shaking your fists at the world in anger is as tempting as it is useless. Life then becomes a struggle to not give in to that temptation in the most horrid of ways. And no character better exemplifies that struggle than Kabal. Special shout out to Longthorn and Serhi Rishin for supporting the channel.